What's going on, guys? My name is Keegan Hanks. Welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about VO2 max and how that impacts our longevity and our health span. This channel is dedicated to my own personal journey and research into trying to live the healthiest, longest life that I can, and taking you guys along for the ride and showing you and talking to you about the things that I'm doing to help improve my longevity and my health span so that you can learn a little bit. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. As I mentioned, today I want to talk about our VO2 max and how that impacts our longevity and our health. Along with the VO2 max, there's also a zone 2 training or more base training that we want to subsequently improve as well at the same time, kind of encompassing two different aspects of cardiovascular training that I hope you guys enjoy. In order to live longer, we essentially need to fight off four main diseases. We need to fight off heart disease, we need to fight off metabolic diseases or type 2 diabetes, neurodegenerative diseases, and then any forms of cancer. Now, a lot of these come down to your genetic code and what you are more predisposed to. That's something that you'd have to consult with a doctor and talk about your different blood levels, but there are things that we can do in a day-to-day setting to help improve our chances of not developing these things in the long run. So today's topic of VO2 max and zone 2 training, you would usually clump in with just the heart disease, but it's also going to tie directly into our type 2 diabetes, our metabolic conditioning, and it's going to also integrate into our neurodegenerative disease, because a lot of people, a lot of doctors believe that neurodegenerative diseases are a sign of improperly metabolizing glucose and carbs in our brain. So the better we can get at improving our metabolism, improving our fuel sources and our energy storages, the more likely we are to help stave off the neurodegenerative diseases. Now, this is not medical advice in any way, shape, or form. Again, these are things that I've learned. So make sure you're talking to a doctor if you have any four of these diseases, or if you're struggling with the potentiality of those four diseases. You may be asking yourself why we need to worry about training our cardiovascular health. It's not just because it's going to make our day-to-days easier, it's going to also improve our heart health, which is going to help reduce the risks of any cardiovascular diseases. We need to start training this now because we're going to have an inevitable decline. So the greater cardiovascular health and greater cardiovascular capacity we have now, the more we have to lose and the better off we are down the road. On top of our cardio making day-to-day activities easier, it's also going to reduce your risk of all-cause mortality. It's going to greatly reduce your risk of stroke. Studies have shown that an increase in your VO2 max can reduce your risk of heart disease and strokes by nearly 10%. So the higher we are, the lower the risk of us developing these diseases and going through these hard. Now for the really scary part. After about the age of 70, we lose 20% of our VO2 max every 10 years. So it's something that's going to drastically and very quickly get away from us if we're not getting on top of it and at least trying to sustain or improve our VO2 max now. Now, I mentioned also that VO2 max training and zone 2 training improves our metabolic health, and that's because our body is learning how to more efficiently burn glucose and burn sugar so that we can have our body go through those carbs, go through those fuel sources. With these two styles of training, we're also able to directly attack and defend against metabolic disorder. How this happens is we're able to, one, burn calories, so we're less likely to be obese and to start to gain body fat, which we know has a deleterious effect on our overall health. The other thing is, while doing these activities, zone 2, VO2 max, our body's gonna get really, really good at burning glucose. And type 2 diabetes comes from not being able to appropriately process the glucose in our bloodstream. So if we're able to have our body naturally do that at a higher rate through training it in these cardiovascular endeavors, then we're able to help mitigate any further down the road risks of developing type 2 diabetes. That does not mean that we have a free pass to eat whatever we want, whenever we want. When we are doing intense cardiovascular training, we still want to fuel our body appropriately and make sure that we're having adequate protein and adequate carbs and fats throughout the day and making sure that it is from as whole and natural foods as possible. Getting ahead of this curve, making sure that we're able to carry our grandkids, carry groceries, go up and down stairs, move our furniture when we need to, keeps us on our day-to-day life. It keeps us active and it keeps us engaged in actually living. And ultimately, when I get old, I want to make sure that I'm engaged in living, that I'm living the life that I want to live. So let's create a quick rundown of what VO2 max is and what zone 2 training is. These are two different styles of training based off of your heart rate or your maximum heart rate. VO2 max as an equation is the maximum rate of oxygen you're able to use during exercise. So the higher your VO2 max is, the bigger your engine is, the more you're able to push yourself and the more you're able to burn calories and burn sources of fuel. There are two main ways that we can test our VO2 max. One of them sucks a lot, and it's just kind of the best way to do it as well. It's going into a doctor or some form of research lab, and they're going to connect you to an oxygen tube right here on your mouth, and then they're going to have you do a progressively more difficult form of cardio, whether it be running on the treadmill or doing it on a bike. I've seen both of them done, and you're essentially just pushing yourself on increasing increments for about a minute until you're unable to do it anymore. And then it's gonna measure the amount of oxygen and CO2 you're inhaling versus exhaling. It's usually in that zone 5, zone 6, zone 7, whatever your highest category heart rate is. And we're looking to make this a very sustained hard effort. With zone 2, it's going to be a very easy, the VO2 max testing that I prefer is just using a fitness tracker like a Garmin, or I believe also Apple Watches do this. And they essentially are going to take all of your training data from both cycling, running, whatever form of cardiovascular training you're doing, and it's going to give you an estimate. Now, it's not going to be quite as accurate as the lab, but I think it's a lot more comfortable, and you're able to continue to do your normal day-to-day training while gaining more data. Now, zone 2 training is a lot easier to sustain. It's something that's going to be around an hour to an hour and a half in terms of length of training or length of session. So it's something that we can sustain, but the goal here is to keep it as consistent as possible. This is our base, this is our endurance threshold that we're able to. This is something that's important because we need to think about our cardio as a pyramid. Our zone 2 training is the base of the pyramid. The bigger the base we have, the taller we can get safely without worrying about tipping over. But if we have a really long base, we're not going to get very high if we only do zone 2. Vice versa, if we only do VO2 max, we're going to get a really tall pyramid, but not a very wide base. We're more likely to fall either side. So we want to make a nice equal triangle as much as possible. So a wide base with a really high top. Generally speaking, that's going to look somewhere in an 80% to 20%. So 80% zone 2, 20% VO2 max. That's going to give us the best width of pyramid while also getting the best height of pyramid and mitigating overly stressing our body. So let's get into some training techniques that you can use to help maximize both your zone 2 training and your VO2 max training. Like I said, you want to get about an 80 to 20 ratio. If your goal is about 4 hours of cardio throughout the week, so you want to hit about a 3.5 hours of zone 2 training and about another half hour of VO2 max. And this is going to be actual VO2 max sessions for that half hour. The ride or the run to get all of that may be a little bit longer, so that would tie into your zone 2 training. Typically speaking, to get the most benefit for zone 2 training, you want to have your sessions be at least an hour long. Now, it's okay to have something around 30, 45 minutes if that's all the time you have. It is better than nothing. Generally speaking, you want to allot for a lot longer time. Hour to an hour and a half tend to be that really good sweet spot of able to fit it in most schedules while also making sure you're getting the most benefit from it. The main goal with zone 2 training and hitting about that hour goal is making sure there's no slowdowns throughout it. You want to be right at that minor breathing discomfort throughout the whole course of it. Otherwise, you're not going to be getting as much benefit as you could have if you were pushing. When doing VO2 max, again, we want to have it very hard and consistent. We're shooting for that zone 5, 6, or 7, depending on what heart rate scale you're using. And these efforts are going to last about 3 to 8 minutes, and you want a 1-to-1 ratio of effort to rest. So if you're pushing yourself for 4 minutes at a time, you want 4 minutes off, or 8 minutes at a time, you want 8 minutes off. And it's going to vary your intensity, but it should be very, very difficult. You should want to stop at the end of your 3 minutes or your 4 minutes. It should be so uncomfortable that you don't want to talk. If anyone's trying to talk to you, you're going to want to yell at them and tell them to go away, but you can't. That's what we're looking for with VO2 max. We want it to be very, very difficult and very uncomfortable. So I'm going to show you on the screen what my typical cardiovascular training sessions throughout the course of the week look like. On Sunday, it's generally an hour and a half of zone 2 training. Monday is an hour bike ride with about 20 minutes or 30 minutes of VO2 max training. Then Tuesday I'm gonna rest, Wednesday I'm gonna rest, Thursday I'm gonna do an hour and a half of zone 2 training, Friday I'm gonna rest, and Saturday I'm gonna do another hour-long ride with about 30 to 20 minutes of VO2 max training. Now this is something that I'm working on that's available for me because of my work schedule. If you have a busier work schedule, do less cardio or just drop the session times down and do it more frequently. That's okay too. For me, I prefer to do all of my zone 2 and VO2 max on an indoor bike trainer. It just works better for me and my lifestyle. I don't want to go out riding on the roads. Here in Austin, Texas, I just don't trust the drivers or the roads to just kind of be out there on my own. You can do this with running as well, but it's very, very difficult to hit zone 2 and to stay in zone 2 while running. Most people would have to get on a treadmill and have an incline and do an incline walk to be able to achieve that steady zone 2 training. It's just a lot less fun on a treadmill. So if you can get a really consistent long hike, you can hit that zone 2 and be in that sweet spot. But again, here in Austin, Texas, it's very flat. We don't have hikes that long. So hopefully by now you've learned and understand why VO2 max and zone 2 training is so important for health and longevity. It's something that I've avoided for a really long time because I ran in college and I just hated cardiovascular training. But going into the research, taking a look at the people who are living a long time and able to be healthy and actually enjoy their old age, I've realized that cardiovascular training is so important, and I hope you guys agree. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.